Mortgage madness, can't you see? Living free and cheap for me. Interest climbing like a tree. Paying dues to destiny. Bright neon dreams in every room.
Dreams in every room. Welcome to the Mic'd Up Show, Season 4, where every mortgage has a story. This is the ultimate hub where the hidden stories behind the mortgage industry come to life. My name is Michael Kelleher,
Good morning. I am Michael Zhao.
and we're going to be leaning on Michael Zhao's underwriting skills from a past life as we dive deep into the entrepreneurial spirit, the strategic insights, and the breakthrough innovations that build the world's greatest mortgage companies. So remember, whether you're advancing your career, scouting for industry leaders, or exploring opportunities in fintech, prop tech, you're in the right place. So let's get ready to unlock the story behind every mortgage. And behind every mortgage, you typically need credit, cash. Kind of stealing Mike Zhao's line here. But cash, like what are you going to put down? How many reserves do you have? And then collateral. But I think what most people get knocked off from, at least from refinance standpoint, probably purchase, what dictates it most is your debt to income ratio, known as a DTI. And today we're going to actually go into mortgage. So our listeners will get a little bit of insight, not just somebody trying to go for a home, which you could learn through osmosis, but if you're in the industry, this is something I think a lot of people have different opinions on every time. So we brought back a past guest of ours on a repeat, and his show was such a hit in the first time because he has such a breadth of knowledge of doing it all. If you recall on the last show, talking about how he wanted that shiny car and get into sales, but his father said, you know, after a while, look, if you want to take over the business someday or run the business or help me, you're going to have to learn underwriting. You're going to have to get in the ditches and see how a loan is made and why you can't just sell everything under the sun. And so I was talking with Jim Carroll here, Partners Bank, and he was explaining to me the evolution of a call that I've been getting a lot at Adopt the Brand, which is, who do you recommend for income calculators? And it's a little harder than you think because the underwriters do not always agree with what the head of the company's buying. The head of the company's buying based on what they like, which is called a rep and warrant. And then the underwriter is not always their signatures on the line. So reps and warrants are not as important to them. So we'll get into that. That's probably a couple, 4 or 5 questions deeper. But let's start. Jim, welcome to the show. If you can put your underwriter hat on, but can you tell us why the evolution of income calculation? Has it always been difficult? Was it harder? Is it easier? And where do you see it today, just without technology?
Yeah. And hello, everybody. It's good to see you guys again. FYI, you're getting my Clark Griswold Christmas shirt for the show. That was a gift I got over the holidays. So I thought I'd wear that for you guys. But no, in regards to the income aspect, the problem had always been that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, when they came out with the AUS engines, DU and LP, the thing was that Fannie and Freddie were making underwriting decisions, but they couldn't, they weren't calculating the income. It was still based on, it was approving the files based on the information that was put in there. And that's why income calculations started, and you've seen with self-employed borrowers, a lot of income calculation software programs come along the way. Everything from LoanBeam, I think Oculus has one, there's been several. But essentially the main problem was that Fannie Mae was making the condition of the approval based on your underwriter's income calculation. Now, they've come along a lot further.
I'm getting a little choppy here. I don't know, Mike Zhao, is it getting choppy on your end?
I understand what Jim's talking about. It is choppy though. Maybe we could adjust the microphone a little bit.
It's probably the connection. what's your maybe if you want to log out, log back in one more time there, Jim, on your phone. Michael, what's your interpretation of what he just said?
Well, first of all, I remember when before I used the computer, we'd load everything into an Acco Fastener, and then into a green folder, and this is as a loan officer. This isn't as an underwriter. We'd Acco Fasten all of our either 2 years of tax returns, and if they were self-employed, we'd have, especially with the contractors here in San Diego, we'd have like 15 to 25 1099s and or the W-2s, and then we'd manually underwrite. And then we'd go to the underwriter and say, oh, well, if they're hourly, we try and pick and choose the way we calculate our income, right? So if they were hourly, then we'd say, well, they average this much in overtime, and this is how we would think we would calculate income. Or we would say, well, in February they got a raise, so we can use the new income instead of the older income because that's what their actual is versus an average of the 2 years. And it's not something that Fannie or Freddie, when you run the DU or LP, really looks at. They don't look at raises or anything. It's just a matter of whether it makes sense or not. I think that we've gone way too deep into the weeds, but in certain circumstances, and where a loan officer, and I don't know this to be anymore, but it used to be where we would have to submit a cover sheet, and that cover sheet would explain how that income was calculated when they were W-2'd or self-employed, whether it was 24 months.
I can't hear you really. I've got a lot of static on my end.
Yeah, I think we might have to just reschedule. I think, Jim, I
do this from my house.
yeah, I think that's probably the best bet to do. I think, again, Jim, why don't you try one more time, just completely going out of the StreamYard, back in on your phone, and hoping maybe the Wi-Fi can handle it. We'll give it one more shot there, and then I'll tell the audience, the goal of this is that Fannie Mae is going to, they've had the ability to have income where they would calculate what you put in, but now it's actually going to give feedback, and with a rep and warrant. The only risk is if you fat finger it or not. But as of like about 2 weeks or this past month or two, and they're going to start adding more self-employed sections. I think it's just Schedule C right now. But if you put in last year's tax returns, this year's tax returns, you match up the lines, it is going to tell you not just yes or no, but it'll give you insight on how to make. And Jim was going to tell us an example where you could help you turn a no into a yes, or make sure it's a yes to a no. And Jim's really believing that, and this is why this is a cool topic, is repurchase risk. Down the road, Fannie might use this against you and say, you could have used our calculation here. You didn't. This is what it would have said. You didn't listen. You didn't try. And now we're telling you that that's why you're buying it back. So I know this is kind of fresh news to you.
I think I'm going to have to reschedule. I did this from my house. So I have to do things in the bank stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna have to film later at night or something, Jim. I think, I don't know. I don't think too many people, if they're still on, Mike, we're already on. What, maybe you could just spitball this with me for a second.
Yeah, I want to comment, Mike. Is it similar to if I put it into a GBT where I scan the documents, upload it, and it spits it out? Or is it something where I can say, this is what I'm spitting in, but in July 15th, starting with July 15th pay stub, the hourly wage went to this, or their salary went from 110,000 to 122,000. Is it something like that, or is there a function of that where you could add that so that Fannie and Freddie can say, oh, well, we can rep and warrant this loan because there's more income. So the mitigation of risk for this loan seems to be better.
So my interpretation of it is if you want direct source data, there are opportunities that have been around for a little bit to get reps and warrants. So when a borrower goes through applying and they sync up their bank account, they're using a bank account verification company. We all know the names, but none are sponsored. So we'll just keep it at bank account verification number that uses something like Plaid, we'll say something more general, right? And you'll get back a token, almost like credit reports, right? And so then that token goes into your LOS from the vendor. And when you run DU, the DU is reading that token for asset. And now they use the direct deposits as income verification. So you can get a rep and warrant off of it reading direct source. You can also, there's companies where you could upload a pay stub to, and they will read the data off of it and give you a number. And Fannie's not rep and warranting that, but the company is rep and warranting it, and then you can run that token through Fannie and get your DU. What this is, my understanding is you're going directly into a Fannie Mae portal, and you are using almost like a wizard, right? And you're filling out the required fields based on the tax return or pay stub you have. And then it will say, this is a rep and warrant, but please verify if the income from the depreciation is trailing negative, we will not rep and warrant it. But if it is trailing positive, we will rep and warrant it. So rather than yes, no, it's giving insights, especially around self-employed or overtime, how it's reading it and making suggestions to you that this is what you want to follow. Now, the caveat is if you run it and fat finger it,
Oof.
you forfeit your rep and warrant. So that's what's causing adoption problems right away, is people are just too scared that if they hit a 9 instead of a 0, hit too many zeros, it sounds like they can't go back and then go for it again. But our funny industry is then they'd rather just not go for it at all. But I think what I'm trying to understand is, does that forfeit the ability to get the rep and warrant at least on the other providers, or does it forfeit it in general? Because that's what's scaring companies away from using it today, is what Jim was going to tell us.
That's interesting to me, Mike, because when I read the, outside of the deeds, the other notarized document inside of loan documents is the errors and omissions. That's also a notarized signed document. And I would think it doesn't say anything about protecting the lender in the event of a sale or assignment. And I would think that if the error and omissions document, which is notarized by the borrower, and says that they have some protection against some kind of error, then why couldn't there also, upon the sale as a CMBS or other sale, also have some kind of document for errors and omissions as well, so you don't have to worry about fat finger syndrome? Because is this an issue where common sense doesn't become common anymore, potentially?
It could be it's so new that it's easier to evaluate risk when you can control it versus the unknown of who's going to say this was fat fingered versus they were trying to run it a couple times at different incomes to see what the answers would be, so they could finally get, like the old way you used to try and run different, higher LTVs or lower LTVs to get an approved eligible. Could be a little bit of that. Also, I think, this is going to give insight. So if they might argue the insight wouldn't have been there if the number was different, versus if this was just yes or no, we're going to cover it. So if it was 290,000, yes, we're going to cover it, and you put 295, you could argue you should cover everything above it. But if the insight is must be in business for 3 years because this is a category marketing agency,
hmm
and then you say, oh, well, they're kind of like a marketing agency, they could argue that we're not really sure what it would have spit out.
Well,
It's,
yeah, and from Jim's point of view as a community bank, I'm looking at it thinking, well, is there a sub-servicing agreement versus a servicing, a broader servicing agreement involved with the, and in that, is there also some kind of mitigation of risk for that? But by the way, I don't know what I don't know, so I'm kind of spitballing questions that's in the back of my head here. But
yeah, I would say from 50% of the mortgage companies don't know it exists. They know it maybe exists, but it's like done cooking now. They thought it was still in the oven. But this is this is all an opinion. I'd say 25% of the ones that know are not on the same page with the underwriter on if it's a real rep and warrant or not, or always those conversations, right? Like just something along those lines, or comfort level of using it. And then the other 25%, unfortunately, and I write a lot about this, are so deep in their waterfall that they didn't see this coming, and it doesn't all of a sudden it makes a third of their waterfall not as useful, or they're obsessed with automation and you started this whole conversation, Mike, where they think if you can't extract the data and enter it automatically, then I don't want to use it. And so they're not using it because they have to manually enter it.
is this really a make sense thing to make life easier for underwriting, or is it? I mean, it's just you and I right now, so we don't have to worry about the FDIC or any banking regulations here. But or is it a money grab just like the loan level price adjustments were? So in other words, like, hey, if if XYZ happens, then you're gonna have to buy the loan back. So is this a money grab, or is this really something to make life easier?
I think Fannie and Freddie are getting better at a data grab. I wouldn't say it's money grab, so it's a data grab, right? Why are we letting third party get all this data if we can get them to fill out more income fields? And that's the carrot, is the rep and warrant. Two, even these income calculators have all, I mean, you talk to any of them and no, ours works perfectly. Ours works perfect. Why is everybody shopping for them? But the income calculator, I think still the person who buys it for reps and warrants and then introduces it to their underwriter, and their underwriters doesn't care about the rep and warrant. They'd rather just underwrite it correctly, and they think calculating their own income is better than using a machine to calculate it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've talked about this about another Fannie Mae product, but this is like an olive branch, I feel like, in the middle. Like you're manually doing it, so you're keeping the underwriters relevant. But you're also showing them that technology is getting smarter because you're giving insight that they usually give as examples of why you can't use it.
Is it really
like what's that?
Is it really smarter? Does it really think? Does it calculate potential increases in wages due to raises or performance bonuses or anything like that?
Yeah, and then it will give you its feedback. If this is a arm's length employer, please, to get the rep and warrant, please provide extra, or it guides you on ways to turn. Jim was going to tell us, but turns a no into a yes, because if you just went on the guidelines, you would not. It provides insight, I think, that is not in the guidelines. So if you just went to the guidelines, it's like 2 years or not. This is actually going to give you abstract, extra ways almost to get approved that you didn't even know Fannie would allow because the guidelines don't allow it. But this machine is actually giving extra conditions. Now, I'm not saying I don't think it's gonna, you're still going to here's my thought. I mean, I'm talking we're gonna need Jim on so we can get
Tell you what,
the answers. But my point is, this still doesn't mean you automatically get approved eligible, right? So it's
Right.
almost like you're running a double findings.
I think one of the questions I want to ask is not on the manufacturing of the product of the mortgage loan, but really, okay. So once you've manufactured, you've gotten approval or or denial, or you approve or you declined it, but then an IMB approved it because they're not a community bank, because they can stick it inside of a collateralized security somewhere, and then try and figure it out from there. So I think I think we've seen defaults increase over the last few years. So is this something that, oh well, the AI said this, so let's blame the AI if there is a default, or are we blaming human error here? So this is super interesting to me because it's actually a lead in, because right now times are still good, there's still demand, so on and so forth. And I think it's going to be that way for the next few years. But I would definitely go on and say, hey, if there's going to be defaults in, say, 2028, and now we've established this, is this going to be a finger pointing time, and finger point to who? I don't know, by the way, but
No, I mean,
I'm posturing.
I'm looking at it now, and I'm going to save it for Jim because he's got a great example here I want to read, but I'm not going to read. So you're going to have to stay tuned for that show if somebody caught
That's
one
nice.
of these undercover files, because I don't even know. This might just live on LinkedIn but never hit our podcast. We'll let Anch decide in the studio.
Yeah.
But there's 12 findings, and they're like
Really?
significant. Yeah, they're
Oh,
like
well,
real findings.
that's like,
And
yeah.
so I think, like, here's what you put into it. Last year's 23, 24. And then it's going to shoot out observations and findings and required observations, findings, required document. He can give you the example, but this one actually says no additional documentation needed. So I would say this is where the puck's going. And if you, I work in, one of my favorite things about this new LOA bot that we have, which is really a setup tool, is when it's like doing activities that don't always result in where the loan goes, but would make sense to do it. That's where I'm seeing so much lift in this. So if you can dual run the new Freddie Mac LP AIM, and you can run the Fannie Mae new income calculator and run them both and find out directly like what income each one's qualifying for. Did you get reps and warrants before you even continue talking to the consumer? That to me is like, if I have reps and warrants, I'll give you an example. If I have reps and warrants on my Fannie Mae, but I have an appraisal waiver on Freddie Mac and not on Fannie Mae, I, as a loan officer, am I pushing towards the rep and warrant at this income level? Or am I saying, forget that, I hate selling a credit card for appraisals. I'm going to go make my company do the hard work, and I'm going to do the easy work, and I'm going to get them to sign up with no appraisal, no money up front. That's where at least the automation up front can start to at least do the work and bring it down to what I just said. Imagine if the person actually had to run it through both, figure it out through both, or saw appraisal waiver on Freddie Mac and never even used this machine because they didn't even want to sell an appraisal.
I'm not looking at either of those if I'm an originator from a sales standpoint, Mike. I'm going to Optimal Blue and figuring out, does Freddie give my borrower more money, or does Fannie give my borrower more money? Because my income is fixed based upon my commission structure. So which one's giving my customer more money back? And if I have to do a little bit more work, so my customer with an average purchase price of almost $1 million here in San Diego, and if you're putting 20% down, that's an $800,000 loan. So if it means a quarter point, that's 20, that's like, $2,000, $2,500, $2,000 to $2,500 to, I don't really care at least from my standpoint, if I'm an originator, I don't really care whether it's a little bit more work for me or not. What I care about, if it's a quarter point between DU or LP, then I'm picking whatever's giving my customer more money back, and I'll just do the extra work if that's the case.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's right or wrong, by the way. I'm just giving you the perspective of what I think an originator would do when it comes to the dollars and cents of things.
but it's the same example. So you got a rep and warrant on one that pays less. Your loan officer is going to choose what you just said, but wouldn't the company like to know, could they spiff it out so that they can get a complete rep and warrant on that difficult income? I don't know. What I'm saying is the technology is here today to have a better understanding and profile of the macro. And if you're not using the best in tech and you're just chasing tech around, you never really see the macro. You're always just going through the tunnel. And
it's so new. We actually don't know what the future mitigation of risk and cost is actually going to be, because we don't know that we don't know if there's what that risk is going to cost to the IMB.
mm-hmm.
So when we see that, then there's then the argument becomes a justification.
Yeah.
So I think it's super interesting. I'd like to hear Jim's point of view. And as long as we're talking about what is it that and by the way, is this a lead into to DU and LP for the income calculation, or is it run with DU and LP?
Well, I have to ask Jim, but I mean, I know you run it separate from, but can you run it before, or do you have to run it after, and when does that one time submit all fat finger thing happen? And that's what we will figure out in that Jim episode. I don't know where this podcast is going to lie, but we'll keep it up on LinkedIn at least.
Yeah. It's gonna be super interesting, because because right now, if you're an originator or an origination assistant, you're running DU or LP with the income, approve, eligible, or not approved or ineligible. You're basically running DU and LP because of the income, and then everything else, like the title issues or anything else, is just secondary. So it's a great question. I'm looking forward to asking Jim on it, because if it's only the income portion, great, as an origination from an origination platform. But if it's everything else and I have to run everything else, am I running 2 extra steps? Is it costing my team? If I'm on East or West Coast and I'm paying that person $28 an hour or $30 an hour to be my LOA because they're hot shot, and well, do I want to run the income calculation or DU? Run DU, hit the whole thing in one shot. I'm not going to have you I'm not going to pay you $30 an hour so you can waste an hour on income and then an hour on DU. That's like wasting $60 of team time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I maybe go down a different rabbit hole. So I'm a little bit.
No, this is the fun stuff I usually talk about. I just don't know enough yet, and we were actually going to learn on the fly. So, thank you to our listeners. I think we just saved a little bit of that bumpiness. It wasn't going to be a great show if we kept it scrambled.
Yeah.
And we'll see everybody Thursday. And yeah, we appreciate the listening, and we'll make sure we get Jim on there fast. I'm sure a lot of people are really curious about this. And if you are, reach out. If you actually listen this long and are curious, please do reach out.
For sure.
Thank you, everybody.
Verifying income for all
Good show.
Actually, those are some pretty good questions.